So welcome to another episode of the Don't Just Sit There podcast. I am Ryan. This is
Aiden.
Aiden, why don't you introduce our guest?
We got a special guest this morning. We got a special guest this afternoon. Jenée Harmon is here. Ryan and Jenée are married for, I'm guessing, like 18 years. I'm just going to guess.
Good guess.
I already knew that. Jenée's a therapist and a counselor. She's an expert in the mental health field. Give us a quick overview. Where'd you go to college? All over again. Where'd you go to college? Master's degree, and then what's your title or specialties?
So I went to college, Cedarville University in Ohio. It's a Christian school there, and then I got my master's degree in Lincoln through Doane. So through a Lincoln campus that was through Doane. Got my master's degree, and then took a hiatus because we moved. And then I came back, started practicing as a provisional therapist in beginning of 2022. Took me a little over 3 years to get my full license.
And now you're with CityCare.
CityCare Counseling.
Can you give us an explanation of what is CityCare? Because some people might know that they're in, I won't even explain it. What is CityCare Counseling?
Yeah, CityCare Counseling started in partnership with Christ Community Church in Omaha, but they're their own organization of therapists that started growing quite a bit. I think there's 20 some in the main Omaha campus, and then they've partnered with churches. So there's several churches around the Omaha area that have CityCare counselors. And then Berean decided to partner with CityCare. And so there's 4 of us CityCare counselors here. There's also one in Kearney now.
Wow. Mm-hmm. One counselor in Kearney?
No, there's at least 2. I think they have an intern now too.
Yeah. So how long have you been with CityCare?
So that has been, it'll be 2 years this summer.
Yeah. We were going to talk about why.
Yeah.
Why? What is it? What is it that that draws you to being a therapist, or what do you love about it?
I have always loved just connecting with people on that one-on-one in the deeper level and just wanting to understand people on that level. So I wanted to be a therapist since I was young, since I was a kid, but I think it really ignited for me when I went through counseling myself when I was in college in Cedarville. And so my therapist had a big impact on me. And I think that really solidified that that's what I wanted to go into.
Wow.
I know you love helping anyone, but is there a certain type of person you really enjoy working with the most? Or do you not like to say that?
Yeah, I have really enjoyed getting to meet with all kinds of different people. I think and if I had to choose, and it's usually women that I meet with, but in their 20s, I think some of that's probably because I started counseling in my 20s.
Yeah.
So
So people might not know, CityCare, Jenée already explained it came from Omaha, but I was I was doing my aunt's funeral in Omaha, actually, at Christ Community, and was talking to their lead pastor about CityCare and just said, hey, if you are expanding to Lincoln, we'd be very interested, because for years here on staff, we have referred out to therapists. So we have a whole network of therapists that we know and that we trust. And so as long as I've been on staff at Lincoln Berean, so since 2007, that's been something we do. There's certainly counseling, pastoral counseling, there's care that happens here, but there are times where we just want to refer out to good, biblically grounded Christian therapists. But one of the things we were running into is there is just a shortage. Yeah. Not only are there not that many, but the other thing is that there is this monsoon of mental health concerns and anxiety, all the things that come with that's happening in our culture. And we were just thinking, we can't keep up. And so the opportunity to do this thing with CityCare was really cool, because it provides a way where they're not Lincoln Berean employees. They're still independent, but they meet here in our building. They have office space in our building. So CityCare is kind of an exciting thing.
Yeah. I went to a counselor at CityCare for a while, and it was awesome. Especially just walking down the hallway to my counselor.
Yeah.
It's the place I work. So, anything else?
No, go ahead.
So we're having Jenée on because I think I might have mentioned this already. We've been talking about anxiety and worry as a church. Brian taught 2 weeks ago or last week about 2 weeks ago about anxiety and worry. Because Ryan mentioned it seems to be everywhere. So I'm just curious from the front end. So we thought we'd ask you some questions about this could be, I'm so curious about mental health. It's so fascinating. But Ryan mentioned that the reality that just seems to be increasing or just seems to be an issue. I'm curious, is it an issue because there seems to be better awareness for it? So everyone's like, oh, I didn't even know there's such a thing as anxiety 20, 30 years ago. Or do you see the reality of like, no, there are actual increases level of anxiety, mental health, other struggles going on?
Yeah. And first, let me clarify that I'm not an expert, and I would not call myself an expert in anxiety, but it's something I think about a lot and try to help people with, but also just try to think about that very question. I mean, I think so many people are asking that question. Is it just that we're more aware,
right,
or has it increased? I think it's both.
Okay.
I think we're more aware of it, which is really good.
Yeah.
I also think that there possibly is an increase in the way we live our life. Yeah.
What are contributing factors in our society? Do you see any trends? Like when you're talking to people, do you see things that there's common choices or common lifestyle things that you think, okay, it might be that this is contributing. So that's something that you have to address with them fairly early.
It's so broad.
Yeah.
So it's tough to narrow that down. I have been reading, though, The Anxious Generation. I don't know if you read that. Yeah. I mean, amazing. I think it's really helpful if, number one, if you're a parent, because things have changed since when we were growing up. So our kids are experiencing something different than we did. And if you work with youth too. Yeah. But like I graduated from my master's degree in 2010, I come back to practicing 10 years later. And that's when we saw this huge shift of people getting smartphones and us all carrying around those smartphones. So even for me, when I was studying my master's degree in counseling, that wasn't a reality. So it's like I'm then diving in to just understand that more, to be able to better serve people in this, what we're experiencing now. And that's different for people growing up in that were teenagers getting a smartphone than it was for me.
Like how, can you give us some what are some misconceptions that people have about mental health in general? So like one of them could be, we think everything's mental health, maybe just not. Or like what are things, whether it's the church or Christians or just broadly, like what are misconceptions people have?
Well, I think like in so many areas of life, because people are living so much out on social media, that you can quickly think that you maybe have an understanding of a mental health issue and try to diagnose yourself, which usually isn't a helpful thing to do. And there's usually not the context of understanding. And then maybe it feels better to grab onto that. That's what I have, without really talking to anyone else about that. So I think, as a therapist, you'll hear about TikTok, and TikTok essentially said, I have this, it's like, okay, well, is that credible? And is that a credible way to think about?
Do you have a lot of clients come in and just already have diagnoses of stuff? Like, here's what I have. Interesting. And have you seen that? Cause you've been practicing for a while. Like, has that changed? Like 5 years ago, would that come in and they say, I have this already? Or is it more like they came in saying, here's what I'm feeling, I don't know what it is, and then you would help?
It really depends on that person, but that's why it's so important to sit down with someone individually and hear their history, their story, and the different people that they've seen for it. Yeah. Because everyone's so different on that.
Yeah.
There has been a bit of maybe like a stigma in the church around even calling things mental health. There's probably some responses in the church that would say, hey, you need to pray more, or you just need to trust God. It's just what it comes down to. And the hard thing is not the hard thing. The thing we need to acknowledge is there is truth to that.
Right.
But sometimes it's kind of a dismissiveness that has occurred in the church, probably historically, on this topic. So how have you processed that? Like how do you navigate that? If someone was like, I don't even think there should be a therapist in the world. What would you like? How do you talk to them about that?
I've thought about that a lot because I think it's tough because I think a lot of well-meaning people, when someone starts sharing openly about their anxiety, their fears, their worry, they've been told, well, you really just need to trust God with that, or have you prayed about that? And sometimes what can happen, even though this person is trying to maybe offer them truth, that person struggling with anxiety and worry then feels shame about that. And so then it actually becomes a heavier burden because, well, now I feel shame that I'm not a good enough Christian, which then it perpetuates the problem. And so it's not solving anything. Whereas, depending on the person too, and how long they've been struggling, if you're someone who you can go back and pinpoint, I started feeling anxious as a really young child. It's something that's been with you. There's patterns, there's habits with that. And so, some of that needs to be unpacked. I mean, that's a process to walk through.
Right. And even if the result of that process is you might discover there is a fundamental lack of trust in God, but to just jump from their present day to that is a pretty huge jump. And so part of the process is helping them discover where'd that start and maybe how do we unlearn some of those beliefs and learn new beliefs. Yeah.
Like, so, someone might be teaching, like when they heard Brian's message 2 weeks ago, they'd be like, okay, I don't even know what anxiety is, or how do I even know if I have anxiety? Like, what's a good place to start of like, I don't know if it's clinical, but I just have it. Like, what are questions you should ask yourself so you can you don't know if you have a problem, but you don't know if it's common. Like, where do you begin?
Well, I think letting somebody else into that, because I think it's if we are feeling isolated and it's just me and my thoughts, it's really hard to just let God into that if we haven't let anyone else in life around us. So it's like, if you can even start with a trusted friend, family member, to start talking that through. But I would want to hear, what does that look like for you? Like, do you just feel anxious in your body? Is it in your mind? Is it the thoughts? Can you name the thoughts that you're thinking? And that can even be a slow process to figure that out.
You said like anxiety between your mind and body. Like, what's the difference? Like, how do they manifest itself differently?
I would say, I can't speak for everyone. I think it's such a personal thing.
Yeah.
Like for me, I usually feel anxiety first in my body. And so my body's feeling the tension, the sickness in my stomach or whatever. It, for me, takes me longer to then figure out what's going on in my mind. It takes me a little bit more time, but I think that can look different for everyone.
Right.
Yeah. I was talking to someone the other day who said that, they didn't know they were stressed or anxious, until they got through, they reached a deadline and they handed in everything they needed to hand in. They finished the project or whatever. It wasn't in school, it was in work. But then suddenly it was like, and you could tell their body was paying attention. Like they were on edge, and I noticed that. I notice when I'm anxious, I don't sleep as well. There's just certain things that I'm like, that doesn't necessarily mean I need to go see a therapist, but it does mean just paying attention to the fact that, okay, there's some, I think I'd probably say, you can, obviously correct me, but I think I'd say there's fear at the base of anxiety. Kind of, I'm anticipating harm. And so I kind of am in this fight or flight mode, and, it's because of the anticipation of harm. And so as you work with people, what do you find to be helpful steps for them to take? So if we're talking about the general population, and someone comes and is like, I kind of have knots in my stomach. I kind of live on edge a little bit. Always, the buzz that's in my head is a little bit of a fear, anxiety, worry buzz. What are some things that I can do to start to step in the right direction and live in the freedom that I think Jesus wants me to live in? Where would you start?
First being able to name that, right? Because it can take a little bit to get to that point where you name it, and then wanting something different. because a lot of times that feels more comfortable for us to stay in what we're used to, being, whether that be maybe a more anxious state. So that feels really uncomfortable to start to say, I want to get freedom in this area. I want to live differently. So, I mean, I think that's the first step. And I think so much of anxiety and worry ties in a lot to, we also talked about busyness and being busy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much. I recently started listening to now I'm going to mess up the title, the John Mark Comer, the Relentless Pursuit.
The ruthless elimination of hurry.
Elimination of hurry, which ties so much into that busyness. But if we have trouble slowing down and we're much more comfortable staying busy, that might be what we need to deal with first.
Yeah.
And so anxiety might come after, because it's kind of underneath that.
Yeah.
So if we're more comfortable going, sometimes people come into my office and they're forced to sit there.
Yeah.
And so then they're maybe thinking about things in a different way and having time to sit with things differently.
Because hurry and worry often go together.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Remember early on when we were doing episodes, one of the things you said you wanted to do to not just sit there was you were going to slow down. Remember, you were going to I'm going to walk slowly. Yeah. I'm going to do all this stuff. How'd that work out for you?
Well, I snapped my ankle in half. So
it's true. You just slow down a lot.
I slowed down a ton.
Yeah.
But now I'm back to it.
You think about biblically, even just the idea the psalmist says, "Why are you downcast, O my soul?" It seems like that's a moment of recognition. Like there is this, I have to come to the point where I recognize I'm not okay, and then in the Psalm and prayer, it's, Lord, why am I not okay? And so that'd be a good first step, starting to recognize some of those things.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question though. I know a lot of people, I know a handful of people, when it seems like they are anxious, they would say, no, I'm just worried. And there's things that are worth being worried about. Like, can you speak on that in terms of like someone who might be like, it's good to be stressed. Stress, like people who work out, stress is good for the muscles. Stress is good for your mind. You need to be stressed and push. Like, can you speak in on like, is there a level of worry that should be good and we as Christians should just allow it and like, that's just life? Or like, how can we, like, what is our expectation with that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it can, that almost can feel good though. I mean, what does that fuel to, if it's good to be worried about that, does that make me feel better because I know more about maybe the issues that are going on in the world because there are things we all could worry about. I don't know. I think as Christians, it's helpful to always go back to, I've been thinking about how Jesus lived. Jesus also had a lot he could have been worried about. He could have been when his ministry started, he could have been worried about the cross that whole time, but he was present with people. So he demonstrated unanxious living. And so if he was able to do that and be present with people and have his ministry, how did he do that?
Yeah.
Like, how can I learn from him in that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like someone's like, it's okay to be worried. That's just life. It's like, well, Jesus wasn't worried about like getting murdered. Then I'm pretty sure he offers you a way of not being worried about my car. I drive a really ugly car and I'm always worried it's going to break. Someone could say, it's just life, dude. Like, that's just, you worry because you care. And I just think it's good. Like, is there something better offered? I think you could argue.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's come back to that. But before we come back to that, what did Jesus believe? I think we need to talk about it. What did he believe that allowed him to live without worry? What do you think?
What do you think?
Well, I don't want to. I'd like to have a discussion about it. I don't want to just tell you what I think.
Can I throw a question back at you that's right along the lines?
Sure.
It's Luke 12 where it's like, fear not. Jesus is like about not being anxious. Jesus says, fear not, little ones. God has happily given you the kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that plays into it where it's like he knew he had the kingdom accessible to him?
I think I think there's a fundamental belief about God and about his kingdom, certainly that
In light of
allowed
those
him to
words.
live differently.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you have thoughts? You were the one that you brought it up, Jenée.
Yeah, you brought it up. You had the answer.
It talks about, and I think that book about living that unhurried life is looking at what Jesus would do though in order to continue his ministry, is take that time away and the quiet. And so I think he was so in tune with knowing he was God, yet God the Father was present with him and knew his purpose so clearly that he was able to walk through each day without when we're worried and anxious, we're usually it's future oriented. Even if it's the next hour, it's future oriented. So I'm robbed of right here, right now,
Right.
because I'm thinking about that. So
Yeah.
how do I release that, let some of that go without just becoming, because then I think you could say, well, then aren't I just a passive person who doesn't care about anything? So what's that tension there?
Yeah.
But I think that's worth us pursuing.
Yeah. It's like anticipation of harm, but if you know that God cares for you and he's going to take care of you and he will be present to you in that moment. And even if things go poorly, he's going to be with you. Then that changes your posture. I think the hard thing in the church is sometimes we act like that's an easy belief to arrive at.
Take the time.
Right.
And it does. It takes time. And that's where like reflecting on that and really trying to live in that and really trying to ask myself, do I just say that's true or do I really believe that's true? And even asking the Lord to help my unbelief, that kind of thing. Going back to your question though, I think there are times because you were asking, what do you say to people who are like, but life's just stressful and that kind of thing. And I do think we need to make a distinction. Like there's a difference between like, there is a thing called like stress that's not bad, right? Like before you played a basketball game, you probably felt anxiety. I don't think that to live without worry or without anxiety means that you don't have butterflies before a game or, there's some tension. Before I speak on a Saturday night, I don't know how you feel before you speak before the youth or whatever, but I always I'm on edge, Now the question is, am I on edge because that's just the nature of the thing? It's kind of a
adrenaline pump.
Yeah, there's some adrenaline that comes with that. Or am I on edge because I really am fearful of the thoughts of others? I really do believe that God he's not gonna be with me, he's not gonna uphold me. So it just there are times where it's like, well, yeah, it'd actually be unnatural, inhuman to not have some degree of adrenaline about that. And I think, Jenée has said to me before, because we'll be talking about this, like I wish I wouldn't have anxiety about this or that. And what we'll talk about is like, that would mean you're dead. Like that's part of it. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there's a difference between having some adrenaline and that kind of thing and being worried or being fearful. It seems like that fear piece is pretty critical in terms of understanding what that aspect of worry or anxiety is that God does not intend for us to live in forever. You know?
Do you have like a recommendation of what point does someone realize, okay, I might need to go seek professional help? You mentioned going to a friend. You mentioned just acknowledging like that's just normal living. Is there a spot where you're like, okay, this is becoming enough of an issue that I need to seek professional help? Is there like a test or something?
Yeah. And I think there's different levels of it because I think like spiritual care ministry at our church, you get that a lot more focused time where you're meeting one-on-one with someone and they're able to really help you unpack some of those things. So I think it is tough. So that's not professional help, right? Because they're caregivers, they're people ministering in the church. You go through a training, but you're not licensed professionally. So I think it can be gray. Seeking professional help though. I mean, I think it's similar to when's the point I need to go to physical therapy or see a doctor for this. It is when it's impairing my life. It's having an impact maybe on work, on how I'm showing up as a parent, as a friend, it's really starting to change what I'm able to do and impact me in that way.
Would you say level of complexity too, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's different for everyone too. That maybe there's some stuff way in the past that needs to be processed, that they just haven't gotten to that point that they've done that.
Are there times where you would tell someone as you're in a session, I don't know actually that you need to be coming here? Would you ever say that to somebody?
Yeah.
What would be something that would prompt you to say that?
I think sometimes when I've seen someone for a while and I'm able to sit with them and we can name some progress, I wouldn't want anyone to feel like they're reliant then on the counseling process, because that can happen. So I think I'm looking for, okay, where did we start, and now are we seeing some progress?
Yeah.
And you can start to spread out. Okay, you don't need to see me as often.
Right. I had a pastor in college that was a little negative towards the whole world of professional counseling, and I was so thankful, because then I met other believers that were mentors in my life that said, it's not like, it doesn't have to be you either trust God or you go to a therapist. Mm-hmm. You can trust God and you can go to a therapist. You can trust God and you can seek counsel from pastors and ministers and friends. Like you can have a multi-faceted approach to this, where it doesn't have to be this either or thing. And sometimes I think this conversation gets cast into this either or category, which I think is ultimately unhelpful and not really a posture we've had as a church.
There's a lot of crossover. You know, I think you could see a lot of crossover between, I brought up spiritual care, CityCare counseling, spiritual direction. There's people now that are just spiritual directors. There's so much crossover. They might not be licensed counselors, but there's so much crossover between what a counseling process and what a spiritual director would do. Yeah. It's that one-on-one.
All right. So Jenée, she won't like this question. Jenée doesn't like hypotheticals that are not based in reality.
Right.
But I like to give her lots of them. So, all right. So if someone came to you and said, I have wrestled for a lot of years with worry, anxiety. So I only have time or margin to do one thing. What's the one thing I should start doing? Fix me.
Heal me.
I think what sometimes is scary for people is practicing some quiet, and just solitude. And how long can we do that? Can we start with 3 minutes?
Why does that help?
It forces you to maybe confront, and like if that feels really uncomfortable, so I get in my car, I don't turn on my radio, or I don't turn on my favorite podcast, which I do that a lot. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that.
Podcast.
No, it's this podcast. Are
you
kidding me?
You turn on this podcast
every time. Listens to every one of these episodes.
Have you listened to every one of them? Have you listened to them?
I think I have listened to all of them.
Wow.
I have.
Wow. I did not think she would.
So, yeah, because then I think you have something to start with. Like, if that was so uncomfortable for you, why? Well, tell me about that. What's coming up for you in that,
Brian mentioned that super important role of scripture, whether it's in your practice or just you personally, as you've mentioned, you counseled yourself through anxiety, whether it's specific scripture passages or just overall, how have you used scripture to help clients, to help yourself when it comes to anxiety and worry?
Yeah, and it depends, it depends on who I would be with and kind of where they're at spiritually too, and biblically. I mean, I've always loved the Philippians 4 passage. And I think what I've been dwelling on more recently that I didn't used to catch, but before, it talks about do not be anxious. It talks about rejoice. It says rejoice, and it says the Lord is near. So if that doesn't feel true to you, if the Lord doesn't feel near, if he feels really far away, it's going to be really hard to not be anxious, because then it says, don't be anxious. Present all your prayers and requests to God. But if I don't feel like he's near and he cares about what I'm worried about in my life, because I think some people struggle with that. Like, God's so big, he's got the whole world. And we're like, why does he care about my little struggles? Like, we kind of minimize ourselves. Why would he care about me?
Yeah.
So I think we have to start there. Like, if God doesn't care and he doesn't feel near, why then is the rest of that passage? So don't be anxious. Bring your request before him. Why am I going to bring requests before him if he's not near?
Interesting.
So we have to go back to that.
That's a bar. That means a good.
Do you know what that means? Do you know what bar means?
No, I don't. Help me out.
Bar means older for the older generation. It means a good word or a good saying or a word of encouragement.
Okay.
That was a bar, Jenée.
Sometimes our youth staff has to inform me on what some of these words mean.
That was a bar.
Yeah.
Lord is near. That's nice.
Let me go one more question on that, though, because I think that's really helpful. What would you say to somebody, and this could be, Aiden, any one of us, I think we can talk about this, but what if someone said, but I don't even know how to pray because the Lord doesn't feel near?
Mm-hmm.
And so, right? I mean, if that feeling or the lack of that feeling is what's preventing them from praying, how would we advise them to pray? You have a thought?
I think you have to start really small.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes you've guided. I've shared with people before, the Bible app actually has a guided prayer. And you could even put it on in your car. So you go in prayer and it's guided prayer. So it's kind of walking you through, let's pray. And so it might start with a verse. But then it is cool. It actually gives you a list of different things you want to pray for. You can go back to. I also love the Pause app, which is John Eldridge has these little meditations but he offers it for free. It's a free app and he bases it off of his books. But the one I've been doing is based off his resilience book, which isn't even his newest book, but he goes through and helps you walk through very basic prayers and like union with Christ. But I think that's a great way to, if that feels completely just new and foreign to you, let's have somebody kind of guide, like let's guide you with that and not just like you're on your own. I guess you have to figure it out. I think you've got to like start with small steps to build on that.
Yeah. I like that.
The thing that came to mind for me also is I think sometimes we're afraid to be ruthlessly honest in prayer. And there are times where maybe my prayer needs to be, Lord, you don't feel near. It's hard for me so I'm praying for a sense or an assurance of your nearness. I don't know how to pray for much more than that. So I'm praying that the thing that I don't feel, the thing that I'm struggling to believe, you would help me believe. I do love that phrase in Mark where it's, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. It seems like that needs to be a constant refrain for us,
That's interesting. You say that like honest prayers, because in my story with anxiety, like the most, almost it seems like when anxiety was really bad for me 2 years ago, what it created was, or maybe a year ago, what it created was the most like more raw, honest combos with God. Like really like something about it just kind of layers just kind of got cut off, and where it was like prayers, I was like, am I allowed to say that at some point? I'm not saying like every prayer needs to be like that, but there are moments of like, I am desperate in my anxiety, like, and me just giving the cookie cutter prayers I learned when I was a kid aren't cutting it right now in this season. And it seems to, it helped then, but it seems to also have stuck through like these past year or so of like, as I engage with God, it's like, I'm very honest. And that seemed a way healthier way to engage with God with honesty. That maybe was just, I don't think anxiety was holding me back from before, or
I think probably the sense of what's proper, right? So it's like, hey, I just need to stuff this and pray the prayer that I've been taught to pray, or that I'm, it says, don't be anxious about anything.
Yeah.
So I need to not be anxious, and I think going back a little bit before that moment and saying, but Lord, the conditions for that lack of anxiety, I don't believe that right now. And so I need to talk to you about that. There were times where I went through a period of depression, my senior year of college, where I remember praying, Lord, I know you are good and I know you're loving. It just doesn't feel real at all in any way directed towards me. So I actually think you are loving. I just don't have a sense of any of it. And so, I don't know what's blocking it, if there's something in me that's blocking it, but I think even just that became the wrestle. It wasn't the wrestle in prayer was, Lord, what is it? So going back to that song, like, Lord, why am I so stuck here? Why do you feel so far off? And it does seem the Psalms are a pretty good school of prayer.
Oh, yeah.
Because man, they are expressing things that the human heart has wrestled with forever,
Well,
So
I think that can be comforting too, that it's a human problem.
Yeah.
Like it's not new, or it's not just people who are anxious. Like it's a very human problem that we're prone to.
Which is interesting. You mentioned like one of the first steps is just going to a trusted friend. Assuming they're a Christian, it's like that can be opened up there where it's like, well, don't you know God's going to take care of you? And in those moments, you'd be like, no, I don't think God's with me at all. And that can be that, not only acknowledging that you have some anxiety, but then also acknowledging and opening up the real view you have of God and how that's kind of hindering the mental health stuff. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's such an opportunity for all believers. Like when you think of the body of Christ, to have that opportunity to, okay, what I say right now isn't going to fix the problem. I can say all I want about God, but that's what they're feeling right now is real.
Yeah.
So if I can care for them in that, I think it's an opportunity to show Christ in that, of when it's like, I don't feel like God cares about me, but this person cares about me in this. So can that then be this bridge to, so then thinking of yourself as someone's friend or someone you're ministering to in kids ministry or something like that, they maybe don't know about God or know how caring God is, but if they know I am, like, can that be the step then in that direction?
There are people listening to this. There might not be people listening to this podcast, but if there are, I'm assuming there are people all over the spectrum with anxiety. There's some people who they've grown and experienced great healing through counseling, through not counseling, whatever. There are people who have no idea they even have anxiety. People who are in the pits and have no hope, or I feel as if they know. Like what is, if you offer one encouragement or hope to those in all spots on that spectrum with anxiety, like what would that be?
Just one. Only
yeah,
one.
that's kind of a hard
Only
question.
3 words too. 2 syllables.
Well, it's tough because I would think someone really, really struggling with anxiety would feel very alone. And I'd want to say you're not alone, but they might feel very alone.
Yeah.
Jenée, do you have any feedback for Aiden on how he could do this better?
I think Aiden's doing a great job.
What about Ryan? What is he doing really poorly right now?
You guys criticized me in this podcast. Yeah. She said, what'd you say?
Try being married to him.
Yeah. That was, we'll be
Does
talking
he
about
comment
that.
on your breath a lot?
We're going to talk about that tonight. No,
Lovingly.
I never talk about her breath.
We say that lovingly.
She probably talks about
Don't
my
ever
breath
eat
more.
garlic.
I drink so much.
Harmon household.
If Jenée ate garlic shrimp.
Well, there's 2 things there. There's fish. Because Ryan
Shrimp
doesn't
isn't
love
fresh,
fish.
is it?
It's a seafood. I don't know.
Not fish.
I don't eat things that swim.
Yeah.
If their majority of their life is in the water, I do not eat them.
You're so boring. All right. That's all we have today. Thanks for listening. Thanks, Jenée, for being here. If you want to ask questions about anything in life, you can ask us at don'tjustsittheirepod@lincolnberean.org.com.
No. LincolnBerean.org. You got it.
Okay.
And then, or comment
on Spotify, comment on YouTube, or go to the website and you'll find a tab where you can register for the Rethink workshop or ask questions.
Our next pod might be a pod that is recorded at camp.
Right. I heard of a camp on Sunday.
With the youths. So looking forward to that.
Really cool kids, and Ryan's going to fit just because Ryan's cool, so he'll fit right in.
If I say bar at camp, would that help me?
Thanks for listening, guys.
All right. Thanks.
Godspeed.
See you later. Thanks, Jenée.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jenée.